As our film opening is a horror genre, we try to incorporate methods that other horror films have used to make their films scary. We decide to use suspense to build up a spooky atmosphere throughout the opening scene. This is done in our film throughout the first part of the opening, where Joe is searching for his friends in the woods. We have also made suspense arise by using the music. This technique is commonly found in films such as Jaws, as when the shark is around, the traditional Jaws music plays. Which makes the film very iconic. The soundtrack that we used in our opening picked up both the pace and the tone as the time spent looking for his friends went on and on. We found this technique very effective as the goal of building suspension was reached. As the fake-out scare happened, the music also got to its highest point. With the outcome of our audience feedback, the use of music was apparently used very well and kept most people focused on the opening. We also used diegetic sounds. This included footsteps, rustling of leaves and snapping of twigs. We kept this in as it ended up making the whole film sound right. As if there were no footsteps going through the forest, the opening would sound too quiet. This convention has also been used in other horror films like Alien, where the diegetic sound is used to add more tension to the scene with footsteps. In most horror films, the lighting is quite low-key, as darkness would be seen as a very stereotypical thing to have in horror films. We use this convention at the start of the opening, as when Joe is walking through the woods, the lighting is quite dark, with the sun being blocked by the trees. This was used to set the scene. As a horror film doesn't stereotypically open with bright colours, the audience automatically knew what something was up. Although, subverting the stereotypes, when our characters walked into the quarry, they were greeted with high-key lighting. This allowed us to sort of restore the peace in the opening. This also showed the audience that the quarry could be a safe place compared to the dark woods, as all the boys are seen together at all times. This could also show that their friendship these boys have are quite strong. Later again in the opening, the boys go back into the woods and into the low-key lighting again. This is when the peace is then ruined. This is shown as when the boys get back, they notice that Joe has vanished and been taken. This is a technique that is often used in multiple films, and not only of the horror genre, but usually signifies that something bad is about to happen, or is happening. This is used in films like Alien and Soul, where the lighting is used as a sort of weapon against the protagonists. Our opening does go against some stereotypes, however. When the main protagonists are all male, most horror films such as Scream have a weak female protagonist. So I decided to subvert the stereotype by using boys to show vulnerability instead of females taking that role. This was quite effective, as the character that we're first introduced to is a boy. He is shown in the complete unknown while being alone, which shows him as quite vulnerable as he is shouting for his friends. He is the first character to be shown, and we didn't see his face for quite a while. This could create some mystery around the character. The costumes we used in the opening reinforce stereotypes of teenagers wearing a certain style of clothes, that being jeans and usually dark clothing. This is used in most films where the protagonist is a young adult, as the costumes are quite stereotypical to that age group. This could also represent the characters as being kind of poor, or maybe not having their own money to spend on fancy clothes. The main social group that our media product is aimed at is that of the middle class. This is shown by the use of the protagonists. The clothing they wear is stereotypical to their age, which is 16 to 17-year-olds. This is shown by the jeans and casual clothing they have on throughout the opening. For example, most of them are wearing Vans. This means that Vans are a designer brand of shoes. They can obviously afford a pair, which can suggest they are of a higher or middle class. The method that we used to make the characters more relatable to our aimed audience was to have their accents and language that they use to sound like they're from the middle class. This means that they will use a medium register or even a low register when talking to one another. This is shown by taboo language that's even being said by one of the characters. The way that accents and language is used throughout the opening suggests the protagonists are well educated, which is stereotypically found in high/middle class. Although stereotype of maturity is subverted as the boys leave their friend in the middle of the woods alone. The age group that we aimed our opening at is around the same age as the characters, which could be used to make the opening quite relatable. So we think that an age of 17 to 20-year-olds is what we're trying to achieve. We reached this aim by showing the audience that the characters are quite immature, which is shown when the boys leave Joe in the woods by himself only to jump out and scare him. This is a stereotype of teenage boys, as they are constantly trying to prank each other, and allowed us to relate that to their age group. Another stereotype of teenagers appear at the end of the opening and is in the form of prop, that being a mobile phone. The boys notice that Joe's left it, and they become quite suspicious, as stereotypically teenagers are always with their phone, as seen by one of the boys when they're all sat around a fire, as he is seen to be on his phone without socialising with everyone else. Although we had to make the aimed age group wider, as having a gap of 3 years was way too narrow. Another way that our social group has been reached is through stereotypes of gender, in this case the gender of male. The stereotype of men being capable to look after themselves and to be brave is subverted here, as the scene where Joe's alone in the woods, he is come across to be scared as he is alone. We achieved this by having to shout out for his friends all the way through the wooded area. Also, when Joe goes missing, there's no sign of struggle, which could show that Joe maybe couldn't protect himself, or was unaware at the time. There are a lot of famous media institutions that make horror films, although my film would have a much smaller budget and would be less professional than these films that have been produced by other companies. An example of a horror film being distributed by a high budget company is The Shining. Warner Brothers, the same company who created films like Friday the 13th, its whole franchise, along with films like The Exorcist, had distributed it. This shows that they are well established in the horror industry and that they have a big fan base. Most films they produce will always get good viewing due to their immense audience size. As my film is low budget, I'd have to go for a company that aren't a huge blockbuster distributor. I have done some research and found a smaller company called Future Shorts, as they are strong in short films, which mine is supposed to be. They also have a lot of access to a lot of film festivals, which would be key so my film could be shown to a large audience of people. Although a drawback of using Future Shorts is that they aren't very strong in horror films, as shown by their quite small portfolio. To distribute my media product, I could use a website called Vimeo. This isn't a real distributor company, but would be a good way to get my film opening online. This website would allow me to upload my opening online so that anyone can see it. It's a similar website to YouTube, but specialises in actual film and filmmaking. This would be quite appropriate for my opening, as it would be very easy to get recognised. Vimeo has also handled a lot of other films, so it'd have a lot of experience in the industry. Stereotypically, a horror film is supposed to be scary, keep you awake at night, and have you frightened at a certain theme. In this case, our theme is being alone, as shown in the first shots in the opening scene. Although my film is based at people who like horror films, I would need to keep in mind the age rating, as most horror films have an age rating of either 15 or 18. I can use this to roughly aim my film opening at a certain age group. Due to my opening only having male characters, I'm trying to aim my opening at the male population, as males would probably think it's for them, as they're the only gender appearing in the opening scene. Although some females might believe it's for them, as there are a few films in the horror genre industry that contain young male teenagers and have a female dominant audience. Although stereotypically, horror films are for males around the age of 15 to 25. This is shown as the opening, as there are only males in the shot at all time, and the immaturity of all the characters. There is also a theme of going out and camping in the woods, which is stereotypically a male thing to do. While going through results of my survey, I realised that most people who liked horror films took part in either A-levels or B-Tech courses, which meant that the age of most of my audience would be 16 to 18-year-olds. This fits into the stereotype of an audience of horror films, which is what I mentioned earlier. Because my task was to create a film opening, I needed it to grip my audience quickly, as I only had around 2 minutes. This would mean my audience would want to be entertained throughout that small amount of time, so they would watch the rest of the film. That's if it was a full feature-length film. To keep them entertained through the opening, I need to use a few techniques and methods to hook the audience in and keep them watching. A technique that I used in my opening was the build-up of suspense in the first part, when Joe is walking through the woods. The longer the scene goes on and the louder the music gets, the more on edge the audience is, as they don't know what's about to happen to him. Once again, this can be linked to a few films like Jaws, where the music kicks in and the audience knows that something's going to happen, but they aren't sure what. Jaws was a big inspiration on the idea of using music to keep the audience on the edge of the seat at all times during the first scene. Also, the other sounds that are used also add atmosphere. These are the diegetic sounds that we kept in while recording. This means the footsteps, the crunch of leaves and the sound of wind. We use this effect to make the audience feel like they're in the scene with the character, which can add a spooky atmosphere, making the scene very real. We also added suspense by not showing the antagonist throughout the entire opening. This shrouded the ending of the opening in mystery, as we didn't know who the antagonist was. Another method that we used to attract our audience is in the wide variety of shot types that we used. We used a lot of tracking shots to make it look like someone was following Joe through the woods, which is usually seen in the horror genre. The longer our shots were, the more suspense was being created, especially when we cut to another shot, then cut back to the same tracking shot, which could be used to show the fast pace of the film. At the end of the opening, before the credits, we decided to add a tracking running shot, which showed the desperateness of the boys trying to find Joe. The characters that feature in my opening will attract my audience, as they seem both quite relatable, being middle-aged teens. This means that it can attract the attention of both genders, as men will believe that it attracts them, as they are the only gender appearing in the opening, and it can relate to them more than if they were female, as this can make the film feel more real and personal. Another feature of our opening would take place in mise-en-scène. This means the light throughout the opening is key to attract my audience. As most horror films use a low-key lighting to set the atmosphere to be spooky and creepy, a good example of this would be Alien, as this film's scenes mostly have low-key lighting, which is why I started off with my lighting being low-key. This allowed me to set the mood straight away, but then reset the mood when the light becomes high-key when the boys go into the quarry. But then, when they go back into the quarry, the bad thing happens to Joe and the boys realise he gets taken. Throughout the whole of the process of making my film opening, I've used a lot of different technologies. These could be from presentation software to editing software. I have had to learn to use these to their full potential, and the outcome has been very successful. The first piece of software that I used is Blogger, a website that allows you to create online blogs. Being owned by Google, you can access it from anywhere, which really helped me, as I usually done a lot more work at home compared to when I was in school. This also means that there has been a fair bit of money involved in the website, which means it's very easy to use and get your head around. I've used Blogger to upload all of my research, planning and outcomes of my final part. It's been very vital to my work, as I can share it and upload images, videos and other files. Although actually making these blog posts on a website can be a bit difficult, so I created a PowerPoint and saved the file as a JPEG and uploaded it onto Blogger that way, which came out very well. For a large bit of text, like the storyline, I created a Word document to sort out how the layers and the fonts would look. I would then upload the file onto a blog post and then upload that. To create most of my blog posts, I use PowerPoint, as I was already very familiar with the software, so my presentations were good. A good advantage to this would be that you'd only have to save the file as a JPEG or PNG and upload it to Blogger. To create my storyboard, I used paper to make a rough copy with a pencil. This made my ideas easy to create, as it was only a rough copy, which means I wouldn't have to make it neat. I would make it better with maybe some help from a piece of software, but to put my rough copy onto Blogger I used a scanner to save it as a JPEG and then I uploaded it. To make my rough copy into a good, clean looking storyboard, I used a website called storyboard.com, which was a website that allowed me to make my drawings into cartoons, my stick figures into characters, and a setting to look quite real. So storyboard.com allowed me to make a full storyboard that looked graphically pleasing. I then saved my final storyboard as a JPEG so then I could upload it to Blogger. To film the opening we used a lot of equipment, which gave us a more professional approach to the shoot. To record the opening we used a Canon 60D, which is a DSLR. Having this camera meant we could change the lens to fit into whatever scenario we needed to, but although we ended up just using a 17 to 85mm EFS lens, which let us be close to the characters to record a dialogue, but then make the shot look like the characters were further away, which was very effective for filming the first scenes. The camera also let us change the ISO. This allowed us to change the lighting, as we couldn't make the shot brighter in post, We used this feature for when the high key lighting was needed. To record diegetic sound, we used a Rode Video Mic Pro, which turned out to be very effective as it picked up the audio that we needed, such as the footsteps and sounds like that. Although the wind proved to be a pain, as when filming our first shoot, we found out that we needed to use what looks like a ball of fluff, which is called a dead cat. This made it so that the wind was quieter. It was still there, but it was a bit quieter. We also used a tripod to record one shot, but it kind of ruined the flow, as every shot was moving with the use of a stabilizer. The stabilizer proved to be very useful in a handful of scenes, as it made the movement look smooth and professional. In our first shoot, we had access to a drone, which was equipped with a 4K camera. Luke, who was part of my filming crew, knew how to fly it, so it was really efficient to use. Using the drone means we could have used camera angles, which could be from a bird's eye view, but could be from a different angle as well. It was very effective for the shot we had in our first shoot, but because we had a different narrative in our second shoot, we found it hard to fit it in, so we had to leave it out. Finally, when editing our opening, we used a piece of software called Adobe After Effects. We also used Premiere Pro to cut all the shots together. After the opening was pieced together in Premiere Pro, we exported it to Adobe After Effects. This is when we added different effects to make the opening look professional. This included color correction, the vignette, and letterbox effect. In our first narrative, we included a scene where one of the boys was pushed off a cliff, but to do this, we used Cinema 4D and created a ragdoll effect, which looked like the boy was falling. This didn't come out to plan, as we didn't have any experience with the program. This didn't come through in the final narrative, though. When doing my preliminary task, I was working with somebody called Matt. I've worked with him before, so this allowed us to have an understanding of one another. Although our prelim task wasn't up to a good enough standard, with some easily avoided mistakes in the final piece. An example of this would be the fact that we weren't time efficient, which means the script was rushed, and so was the camera angles and shots we used. Most noticeably, we changed clothes several times throughout the making of the prelim task. I managed to work on my time efficiency and learnt from my prelim task, as when it came on to filming the final media product, I had planned a lot in advance. This included the location, the day, the props, the costumes, the script and the story. This allowed me to be quite time efficient, meaning I could complete all which was necessary in a allotted amount of time. Using time to my advantage, I finished the filming, editing, reshoots all in time, which allowed me to do extra work to make my project better. The quality of my prelim task was very low, as we could only use the school cameras, which filmed in 720p. Because of this, my video looked quite tacky and not professional. I learnt from this by filming the opening with a different camera, one that could film in higher quality. This made the image look crisp and was easy on the eye, whereas my prelim task could cause a bit of eye strain because of the quality. Although, while filming the prelim task, lighting was difficult to get right, as if you were inside, the lighting was automatically low-key, whereas if there was sun and you were filming outside, the lighting becomes very high-key. This acted as a problem, as we realised that in post we could make the shot look darker, but not brighter. This affected the way that we recorded shots, as we needed the inside scenes to be as bright as possible, which was difficult to do in a dark hallway. When filming our final piece, we made sure that the lighting was good enough. As we were filming outside, we needed to be at least a bit of sun to make the shot look bright. Although to make the atmosphere quite spooky, we made the shot darker when editing the shots together. The bright lighting gave us a choice to either keep it bright or make it darker, as if we needed a bright shot, we couldn't have done it if the natural lighting was dark. This gave my film opening a spookier mood to it, and overall made the film look more professional than my prelim task. When editing the prelim task, I used iMovie on the Macs. The software was easy to get my head around, as I'd already used it at home. Although using iMovie limited me, as adding effects and colour correction was difficult. While using iMovie, we added some transitions to make the video flow, as we also added a gunshot to make the scenes sound more realistic and professional. When it came to editing my film opening, I used Adobe After Effects. This allowed me to add more effects to my film, which was much easier than iMovie. I made my film darker for effect. I used a letterbox effect so that the resolution of the quality was higher. I also used a vignette effect, which gave the borders of my film a dark, shadowy outline. When filming and editing my prelim task, I found out that the cuts in my final piece were quite long and made a shot look awkward. This also ruined the flow of the video. I learnt from this in my film opening and made the cuts smaller and quicker. This allowed me to match movements of the characters to make the shot look real and made the whole opening flow. Overall, I think that my prelim task helped me learn from the mistakes I made so that I could make sure that I'm not doing again in the final piece. I also learnt that I need to manage my time more efficiently, which made shooting the film a lot easier as I already knew what I needed to do. Thank you for listening. My name's Noah Herbert and this is the analysis on Hinterland.